Welcome to the Get to the Root podcast, where we build your health from the ground up. At Root Functional Medicine, we're on a mission to bring sustainable and validated functional medicine to the world. As a team of doctors and dietitians, we are dedicated to treating gut health, hormones, autoimmune conditions, and metabolic health at the root cause through advanced testing, food as medicine, and telehealth programs. For years, we've been helping people get to the root of their health concerns. Now, we're here to share our knowledge so you can benefit too. Stay tuned and join us as we get to the root.
I'm your host, Dr. Erica Armstrong. In this episode, we will explore how functional medicine can help to improve your mental health and well-being. As with any condition, we will seek to understand the root cause of symptoms and explore how inflammation, nervous system imbalances, gut health, sleep, and more can impact mental health. I'm here today with root dietitian Danielle Fiskars-Byers, who works with our members one-on-one to support mental health, among other concerns, from a nutrition and lifestyle perspective. Welcome, Danielle. Welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed your last episode and excited to have you back. So, as you know, many of our members come to us after having spent time bouncing around between specialist to specialist because they were struggling with symptoms, and sometimes they come away with more questions than answers when they come back to root or when they start with root. And so during this time of confusion and overwhelm, they're still struggling with their symptoms, and it can take a serious physical and mental toll. So what are some of the unique mental health challenges you've had members share with you when they're living with conditions, for example, autoimmune diseases or chronic fatigue or hormonal disorders such as polycystic ovarian syndrome?
Yeah, there is certainly a mental strain on their mental health, like you said. When you don't feel well or as you wait for a diagnosis, it can be really challenging not to feel stressed by how poor you feel in your body and all the questions that come up as to what is causing you to not feel well. I think there is often some relief with diagnosis, but it also comes with a pretty big adjustment to lifestyle at times, and that presents its own unique set of challenges. I would say depression, anxiety, loneliness, and a change in the way that they see themselves are all common experiences that I've had members share with us, especially with ongoing health conditions like Hashimoto's or IBS and PCOS.
Can you tell us more about how the root clinicians, the doctors and dietitians, can help our members feel empowered through this healing journey, either through validation or trauma-informed care or others?
Sure. Our goal is always to listen to our members and validate their experiences. I think that's probably something that sets us apart a bit. Rather than jumping into solutions, it's really important for those first couple visits for our members to feel like they can share what they've been going through and for us to validate that experience. It's also our goal to understand what is most important to them as we work to find the root cause of what is causing symptoms. Often have members share what their symptoms are, and through that conversation, I'm starting to create plans in my head to address a certain symptom. And when I pause to ask them of the symptoms that they've talked to me about, which is most important for them to focus on, sometimes is not the one that I would consider the most important. So allowing them to lead their plan of care can be really helpful. And we want to give them options as to how to manage and improve their symptoms, and then work on creating a plan that's sustainable with their lifestyle. So it could be great that I have all of these ideas, but if it doesn't match with what their availability is, whether that's with time or mental energy to dedicate to those things, then it's not super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you framed what's important to them. What is the symptoms that are bothering them the most? We know that living with chronic health conditions can increase their baseline level of stress, and then higher levels of stress can then further drive symptoms. Could you share with us some of the strategies that we recommend to help break this cycle?
Recognizing and acknowledging that higher baseline of stress is often the first step. I think we can become familiar with that, and so it becomes our new normal, and it's important for our members to acknowledge the physical and mental stress of not feeling well. This acknowledgement can then allow our members to accept and reframe their thinking about their health, their bodies, and their current situation. Cognitive reframing and acceptance may help to reduce the ruminating thoughts and feelings associated with their health. I know that acceptance often feels like giving up, but that isn't what we're going after. The goal with acceptance is to increase self-compassion and shift away from those unhelpful thought patterns so that we can focus on what that member can do to help themselves to feel better. Another strategy to consider would be nervous system regulation, and that can help our members shift out of that sympathetic state, that fight or flight, into a parasympathetic nervous system state, so rest and digest. Engaging in things like breath work or grounding exercises, vagal nerve stimulation, or limbic system retraining can help with these things.
Those are all great tools. What particular practical tools do you recommend to help build stress resilience?
I really like things like breath work. Research has shown that box breathing, mindfulness, gratitude reflection, journaling, and movement, especially rhythmic movement, so things like walking, dancing, or gentle yoga, can really help our bodies adapt to stress. I think it's important for us to talk to our members about habit bundling some of these tools, and I like to do this around meals since that's the main focus of my time with members is around nutrition. So this could look like doing a couple rounds of box breathing before or after their meals, maybe practicing some mindfulness at mealtime, so looking at their plate, smelling their food, noticing what colors and textures are on their plate, paying attention to the aromas or what the perfect combination of the food on their plate is to create that perfect bite helps to bring more mindfulness to meal times. And then thinking about pairing a little bit of movement with our meal times. So this is a bit of a dual benefit that movement can help with stress resilience, but we also know it helps with blood sugar regulation. So a short walk or a little dance party after meals can be a great way to build in a little movement. If they're doing something like a walk, they might even reflect on things that they're feeling grateful for that day after their mealtime.
Yes, and that's habit stacking. So you'll be more likely to continue with that routine of walking after meals if that just becomes your routine and stacking those two great things together.
Absolutely.
You mentioned limbic system retraining. Can you tell our listeners more about the limbic system and its influence on our emotional response and stress regulation?
Yes. So we have a great program on our community page. So if people listening are Access members, I would highly recommend checking out all the great content you put together around limbic system, but I can go into a little bit more about what the limbic system is and then what retraining looks like. So our limbic system consists of 4 main structures, and those structures are located deep in the forebrain. It's often referred to our brain's emotional center, so it plays a role in how our emotions are processed, memories are formed, and stress is regulated. The 4 main components are the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and the anterior cingulate cortex and insula. So these make up our limbic system. Each of these parts of the brain have a role in that limbic system. So for example, the amygdala detects threats and triggers our fight or flight response, processes fear and emotional memories. The hippocampus is going to integrate our memories, store and organize key memories, and allow us to distinguish between past and present threats. The hypothalamus will link the nervous system to the endocrine system through something called the HPA axis. And this is probably something that our listeners have heard about. That HPA axis controls the release of our stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And finally, the anterior cingulate cortex and insula act as our emotional monitors. So these help with interoception. They're involved with empathy, emotional awareness, and self-regulation. All of these parts of the limbic system work together as a whole. They play a role in that emotional reactivity, stress looping, and the hardwired patterns. This is why seemingly little things can trigger big responses, or how small disruptions to things like sleep, stress, or nutrition can lead to symptom flares for people. Put more simply, when our body is stuck in a highly stressed state, our limbic system can be hypersensitive.
Yes, hypersensitive and overreactive. Like you said, most of us are aware of this HPA axis now. We talk about it a lot, the stress axis and the cortisol axis. But I think a lot of us don't think about where the very first part of that starts, the hypothalamus being in the limbic system, and the cascade of events that can happen from there if we don't focus on retraining the limbic system, which can then lead to a cascade of symptoms downstream. So how does one go about retraining their limbic system?
Yeah. The goal of retraining the limbic system is to help the brain and body shift out of that state of hypervigilance. So there are 5 key steps to limbic system retraining. The first step will be interrupting the pattern. For example, if you notice that symptoms start to increase and this leads to more anxiety, we would want to interrupt this by saying something like no and gently tapping on your wrist, for example. So it's interrupting that pattern. The next part would be to redirect through visualization. So this would be thinking about a safe, happy, or calming experience. I do this by closing my eyes. I like to take a couple deep breaths and then reflect on memories that bring me joy, peace, or gratitude. Step 3 will be affirmation and reframing. This helps to retrain the brain's default narrative. When we're in a state of hypervigilance, the brain's default pattern is stress. So it's like merging onto the highway to get back to your parents' house. It's this automatic thing. We don't really have to think about it. With retraining, we can shift this narrative to help us to become more resilient. To affirm and reframe, we can say things like, I am safe. This is my body's way of telling me that I need to slow down. So shifting that experience of symptoms from something's wrong to this is my body telling me I need to do something a little different. Gratitude and joy practices would be step 4. In this step, you'll focus on joyful and meaningful experiences daily. This helps us to build a broader emotional range and reduce those well-traveled fear pathways. And then finally, repetition is that last step. So consistently using these steps for at least 6 months is recommended to see full benefits.
That daily repetition is so key. I know we often want to see immediate results, but if you think about how long it took for your brain to be wired the way it is, rewiring is going to take some consistent practice. One other tip I just want to mention is as far as remembering a positive experience, sometimes when your limbic system is heightened, it's hard to switch your brain right in that moment. So having a few things that you've either journaled about or thought about ahead of time before you may get into these more anxious moments that you can quickly call upon a visual memory will help you move into that from the state of recognizing the cortisol and anxiety to moving into the visualization, having some readily available memories that you've pre-planned to jump into can be helpful. And then you can naturally go on to deeper and deeper memories from there. But that was a great synopsis of a complicated system. So very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
When might someone need to utilize limbic system retraining and what benefits can they experience from this?
I think the short answer is everyone can benefit from it for sure, specifically with conditions like IBS, chronic fatigue syndrome, mold and chemical sensitivity, chronic Lyme, fibromyalgia, PCOS, endometriosis. I think all of these specific conditions can really benefit. I think if you've been through multiple doctor visits and you're still not sure what the root cause of your symptoms are, you're probably in a state of hypervigilance from just that experience. Basically, everyone listening would benefit. What people can expect to experience would be things like an improvement in fatigue and energy levels. We often have members report to us that their sleep and digestion improve as their bodies shift out of that chronic fight or flight state. As your nervous system is able to spend more time in that parasympathetic rest and digest state, they often report improved emotional regulation, less anxiety, fewer triggers or flare-ups, and a greater sense of safety and stability within their bodies. I can attest to that as I've put these practices into my daily routine. I definitely notice just a lower level of anxiety within myself. With continued consistency, many people find that they have improved tolerance to their triggers, more trust in their bodily cues, so less of that reactivity when symptoms start to come up, and a greater capacity for healing protocols as well.
By this point, the audience is probably well aware that although you're a food as medicine expert and nutrition expert, there's obviously so much more that you do as a dietitian at Root, and so many other things influence your nutrition and digestion and absorption and reaction to the foods that you're eating. So shifting gears to the next topic, exercise and sleep for mental wellness. Why is movement so important for our mental health?
Movement helps to reduce anxiety. It also helps with regulating our moods. It can improve resilience and protect against depression. We see that movement helps to improve our focus and train the autonomic nervous system. So it helps shifting in and out of those rest and digest and fight or flight states. We also know that movement helps with regulating our appetite and improving sleep. So through movement, our bodies produce feel-good neurotransmitters, things like dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Movement also releases endorphins that reduce physical pain and emotional distress. So you might have heard of something called the runner's high or exercise high. Those are those endorphins. Regular physical activity helps us to regulate the HPA axis, like we talked about earlier, and balance our cortisol levels and improve how our body responds to stress. We see in the research that aerobic exercise in particular helps to promote something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports neuroplasticity, or the brain's ability to learn, adapt, and grow. Higher levels of BDNF are associated with lower levels of depression, and we also know that movement is going to positively impact our gut microbiome through the gut-brain axis and stimulation of the vagus nerve.
I can relate to the runner's high. Being a past competitive runner, are there forms of exercise that are better than others for supporting mental health?
So this is like both an objective and subjective question. I think whatever kind of exercise you can sustainably integrate into your routine is going to be the best exercise for you. We do know from research that different forms of movement can provide unique mental and emotional benefits. So mind-body movements like yoga, tai chi, and Pilates are typically more associated with improving anxiety, trauma recovery, and nervous system regulation. Walking, especially if it can be done outdoors, is really beneficial for depression, mood elevation, and stress relief. And then more intense exercise like running, cycling, swimming, or dancing can be really helpful for depression, mood regulation, and ADHD.
Wonderful. And this physical movement can help with sleep, and quality sleep is definitely beneficial for mental health. Can you tell us more about why poor sleep can impact our mental health?
Sure. Well, there is this relationship, right? Poor sleep leads to a reduced mood and mental health, and poor mood and mental health can negatively impact our sleep. So one of those unfortunate cycles that we can get into. During sleep, our brains integrate the emotions that we experience throughout the day. Unprocessed feelings can lead to an increase in irritability, reactivity, and lower tolerance to stress. We know that sleep loss leads to an increase in our stress hormone, so cortisol and adrenaline. We also know that sleep is needed to produce the feel-good neurotransmitters that we talked about earlier. So when sleep is disrupted, we can see a downregulation of production of those happy hormones. With poor sleep and recovery, it often comes with an increased difficulty concentrating, higher levels of inflammation, and changes in appetite and digestion. A study published in the journal Sleep showed that sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night led to an increase in average intake by 300 to 500 calories, often coming from snack foods that were rich in carbohydrates and fat after dinner. The study also showed that just a reduction in sleep by 1 to 2 hours can change how our hunger and fullness hormones are regulated.
Those are really great points and tips there. How might our listeners go about improving both the quality and consistency of their sleep?
Lots of things can play into the quality and consistency of our sleep. So I typically recommend that members try choosing a few of the things that we'll talk about and build from there. So start with the low-hanging fruit. Start with the thing that sounds easiest to integrate or most useful to you, and then build out from there. We know that creating a consistent sleep and wake cycle, so going to bed and waking up at the same time daily, even on the weekends, has been shown to significantly improve sleep quality by supporting the body's natural circadian rhythm. Having a consistent bedtime helps to reduce sleep latency, that time that it takes for us to fall asleep, and increase the amount of time spent in deep and REM sleep. Going to bed later, so after 11 p.m., is typically associated with higher levels of evening cortisol, a reduction in melatonin production, changes in our hunger and fullness hormones, leptin and ghrelin, and an increase in insulin resistance and blood sugar dysregulation. So aiming to go to bed by 10 p.m. typically aligns better with our body's natural circadian rhythm, which allows us to have more of that deep and restorative sleep. Earlier bedtimes are often associated with improved physical recovery and immune health, better blood sugar regulation, and more balanced hormones. I like to help myself get to bed earlier by creating evening routines that help me to wind down. So creating an evening routine might be a helpful strategy for you. Everyone's routine is going to look a little bit different, but I've had members share that their evening routines consist of dimming the lights, turning off their screens and electronics. They might take a hot bath or shower and then read for a few minutes in bed. Whatever helps you to downregulate at the end of the day to help shift into that relaxed state, that rest and digest state, is going to be really helpful for sleep quality and consistency. We often work with people who have a hard time shutting off their brains at night, so this wired but tired state. In those cases, utilizing something like breath work and meditation or jotting down the things that are ruminating on your mind in a worry journal can be really helpful to shut that cycle down. Cooler temperatures in the evening, so cooling your house to around 60 to 67 degrees helps to lower our body's natural core temperature, and that helps with melatonin production, which helps us to fall asleep. And then, like we talked about, avoiding those harsh overhead lights and screens. So blocking out that blue light can help improve melatonin production as well. On the supplement side, we often utilize things like magnesium glycinate, L-theanine, valerian root, melatonin, or phosphatidylserine to help with evening cortisol levels and shifting into better sleep quality.
We love using the magnesium glycinate at Root. So many people are deficient, and the calming benefits on top of it are really great. And then our sleep support. That was all really great tips for falling asleep. One thing I'll add is that if you're one of these people that has a lot of trouble falling asleep, the consistent bedtime and wake time are helpful, but it might be easier to start with a consistent wake time and then work your way towards the consistent bedtime in smaller increments at a time, where you're moving your bedtime consistently by about 15 minutes, and you'll get there. The brain will retrain actually faster in sleep than it will in other things. So let's move on to one of our main topics, which is nutrition, the foundation of functional medicine and your particular area of expertise. How do you eat better for mental health?
I think focusing on blood sugar stability is a great place to start. We do know that there's a good correlation between blood sugar stability and mental health. How stable our blood sugar is going to influence our mood, energy, focus, and emotional regulation throughout the day. Big shifts in our blood sugar levels, whether that's a rapid increase or decrease, can trigger physiological stress responses, leading to mood changes. Low blood sugar, hypoglycemia, whether that's from a sudden drop or from going several hours without eating, can cause irritability, a reduction in focus, and mental acuity, fatigue, and anxiety. While high blood sugar, hyperglycemia, caused from a large meal or carbohydrate-rich meal, leads to a rapid increase in blood sugar followed by a crash. So I almost think of this as like a big tsunami wave. And that big tsunami wave, that huge surge and then big crash, can lead to our stress hormones being released, so that cortisol and adrenaline. And those can lead to that like jittery or shaky feeling that you might get after a large meal or a really sugary food. That can increase anxiety and cause rapid shifts in moods and cravings. So if you had that nice big scoop of ice cream mid-afternoon, and then a couple hours later, you're like, gosh, I could use a big cup of coffee. That's probably what's happening there. Over time, that instability in blood sugar leads to a reduced insulin sensitivity and an increase in inflammation. And we know that higher levels of inflammation increase our risk of depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline.
You just described how blood sugar spikes or crashes can affect mood and focus and even emotional regulation. Are there signs that people can use to point to blood sugar issues being a root cause for increased anxiety? I know sometimes we use the continuous glucose monitors, which can be helpful in real time when you're having symptoms to take a look and see what's going on. But what other ways can people tell that blood sugar may be a root cause here?
Yeah. If you find that you feel less stressed or more calm and focused after eating, that could be a sign that you're experiencing hypoglycemia or a less optimal blood sugar prior to eating. On the counter side of that, if you feel more fatigued, anxious, or have more cravings after eating, this could be a sign that you're experiencing hyperglycemia after eating, so higher blood sugar. Working with a Root dietitian or following the Root plate can help to improve blood sugar stability between and after meals.
You've talked a lot about inflammation and how different aspects of health can affect that, even sleep and cortisol and blood sugar. Is there a link between inflammation and depression or cognitive changes?
Absolutely. There's a strong link between inflammation and depression and cognitive changes. Ongoing inflammation impacts both the brain and the nervous system. We know that higher levels of inflammatory cytokines and enzymes lead to changes in productions of our neurotransmitters. It also changes the way our brain signals and our brain's neuroplasticity. More neurotoxic metabolites are formed with these changes and contribute to mood shifts, anxiety, fatigue, and reduced motivation. Higher levels of inflammation are associated with lower mental acuity, impaired memory, and a higher risk for things like dementia and Alzheimer's disease. We know that diet plays a major role in modulating inflammation. Research has shown that higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids reduce inflammation. So this is why the Mediterranean diet, which is so rich in fatty fish, a great source of omega-3s, is often recommended for helping to reduce inflammation. Diets rich in fiber, probiotic foods, and phytonutrients from fresh vegetables, herbs, and fruits can also help reduce inflammation in the body. And this is through the antioxidants in those foods, which help neutralize the free radicals and therefore lower levels of inflammation. The fiber and probiotics support our gut health, where over 70% of our immune system lives. With a higher fiber and probiotic-rich diet, our gut microbiome is often healthier, and a healthy gut microbiome produces more short-chain fatty acids through the beneficial bacteria that live in our gut microbiome, and these fatty acids help to feed our intestinal cells and reduce inflammation in the gut.
You mentioned increasing intake of fish and other foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids to help with inflammation. Why are EPA and DHA, which are two types of omega-3s, so critical for brain function and emotional balance?
DHA is part of the structural building block of our brain. It helps with neuron signaling and neuroplasticity. Lower levels of DHA have been linked to slower thinking, cognitive decline, and poor memory. Well, EPA has strong anti-inflammatory effects, and higher levels have been linked to a reduction in depression, anxiety, and dementia. EPA helps to improve our feel-good neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, and research shows that EPA and DHA also help to regulate that HPA axis that we've talked about already. So that HPA axis, like we've mentioned, is in charge of our stress response. So improved omega-3 status can help with stress resilience and more balanced cortisol levels.
Another profound way that functional medicine and nutrition can support mental health is the gut-brain axis. Can you explain this role in mental health and even how probiotics can influence our gut-brain axis?
Sure. By supporting a healthy gut microbiome, we are helping to regulate our mood, stress response, and cognitive function. Like we talked about earlier, more beneficial bacteria in our gut microbiome increases the production of short-chain fatty acids, which then help with the production of our neurotransmitters, GABA, serotonin, and dopamine. And all of those are going to help with our mental health overall. Studies have shown that specific strains of bacteria have been linked to lower levels of cortisol and a reduction in stress, anxiety, and depression. More research is currently being done in this area called psychobiotics that have a benefit on the brain and the gut-brain axis. A more balanced microbiome helps with stimulating the vagus nerve, which promotes healthy digestion and improves feeling of calm, relaxation, and emotional regulation. And we also know that probiotics can help repair and prevent leaky gut. When our gut is not having things pass in and through it that shouldn't be, that's going to lead to less immune activation and fewer mood-altering inflammatory signals going to the brain.
So if our listeners were interested in adding probiotics or the omega-3s that you were talking about to their routine, how would you advise them to go about doing that?
I always recommend a food-first approach. So there's definitely supplements for these things, but if we can add more things to our plate, I think that's optimal. If you enjoy fish, considering adding in fish 2 to 3 times a week to your meals is a great way to increase omega-3 fatty acids. So things like salmon, tuna, sardines, mackerel, those will all be great sources of omega-3 fatty acids. I've been recommending mixing in some sardines to things like tuna salad. So you're getting a bit of a dual benefit there. If you don't enjoy fish, think about adding in more chia seeds or ground flax seeds or walnuts. And if none of those things are enjoyable to you, then we could definitely add in an omega-3 supplement or use a supplement in combination with those foods. For probiotic-rich foods, we could aim to include these things multiple times a week, if not daily. It depends on how well you enjoy these things. So things like sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, kefir, yogurt, and kombucha or cultured cottage cheese are all great sources of probiotics to include daily. Serving sizes will change a bit. So things like sauerkraut, kimchi, and miso, we're looking about a tablespoon size daily, while things like yogurt, kombucha, kefir, cultured cottage cheese, at least 4 ounces is needed to get to that colony-forming units. It's going to make a difference on our gut microbiome.
Thank you for that. And if you don't tolerate fermented foods, it might be time to dig into why or consider some gut health testing. So we covered a lot today, Danielle. Where would you encourage our listeners to start if they're interested in putting these tips into practice?
As a dietitian, I think my recommendation is always going to be to start with your diet first. So I would certainly encourage our listeners to focus on filling their plates with lots of colorful plant foods, include those fatty fish sources 2 to 3 times a week, and then start finding ways to layer in more probiotic-rich foods, either through the foods that we talked about or through supplements. Because sleep and movement have such a great impact on our hunger levels, blood sugar stability, and mood, I would also encourage our listeners to explore ways to improve their sleep and move more throughout the day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Danielle. As usual, another great episode and very informative from you. So really appreciate you coming back on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you'd like to work one-on-one with Danielle, you can join Root as an individual member or ask your employer to make Root your next favorite health benefit. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next Get to the Root podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Get to the Root podcast. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who might benefit, and leave us a review. For more resources and to connect with us, visit rootfunctionalmedicine.com. Remember, your health journey starts with understanding the root cause. Join us next time.